Hello, it is Ryan, and we could all use an extra bright spot in our day, couldn't we? Just to make up for things like sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, counting your steps, all the mundane stuff. That is why I'm such a big fan of Chumba Casino. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere with daily bonuses. That should brighten your day a little. Actually, a lot. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com. That's ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Hello, it is Ryan, and we could all use an extra bright spot in our day, couldn't we? Just to make up for things like sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, counting your steps, all the mundane stuff. That is why I'm such a big fan of Chumba Casino. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere with daily bonuses. That should brighten your day a little. Actually, a lot. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com. That's ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Hello, it is Ryan, and we could all use an extra bright spot in our day, couldn't we? Just to make up for things like sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, counting your steps, all the mundane stuff. That is why I'm such a big fan of Chumba Casino. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere with daily bonuses. That should brighten your day a little. Actually, a lot. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com. That's ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Serie A Chronicles is a Mina Chronicles production.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Serie A Chronicles. It's me, Patrick Kendrick, joined as ever by Nicky Bandini and Mina Rizuki. Before we get started, a quick reminder of our free 7-day trial for our Chronicles Tifosi Patreon membership, where you can get access to all full episodes 100% ad-free, plus bonuses such as videos and behind-the-scenes content. How are we getting on this Tuesday, after another weekend of Serie A action where we had, I think, fewer draws than we've had in previous weeks, and we had a few more things that were actually decided for once. It was no longer a case of the sort of stasis, was it? Now things have actually moved apace, Nikki.
Yeah, Mina was talking just before we came on. I hope Mina might be mad at you saying about end of season fatigue, and I can relate to it. The end of football seasons, I think all of us who work in football, it's a brilliant job. None of us are complaining about it, but you do get worn down at the end of a football season. It's like, I was about to say like the players, nothing like the players, because we're not running around anywhere. In fact, some of us could do with running around a little bit more, frankly. But there is that thing of just, you get to the end of a season when there's been a lot of games and a bit of tiredness sets in. But I quite enjoyed this weekend. I thought it was another sort of more interesting one, as you say, after a couple of weeks with lots of draws. I think the fact of Bologna getting their Champions League spot and then seeing Orsolini taking a journalist for a drive in his car and driving into town, not even knowing where he was heading to, not even sure where he was going to go off to celebrate because he couldn't get to Piazza Maggiore. Orso says that in the car. He said, well, there's no chance. It's already gnarled up. So looking for somewhere to go and celebrate. It's just a reminder, isn't it? Bologna are a club who have this actually quite rich history. It's just before most people who support them now were born, because they were successful really, their first league title in 1925 and then building up to the stoppage before the Second World War, was their heyday. And it's been 60 years since they've been in the Champions League. Of course, in reality, that just means 60 years since they won the league, because the Champions League hasn't had teams that weren't league winners for all that long in the grand scheme of things. And that felt like a thing. And it was Atalanta's win that got them there. And with I don't know if symmetry is quite the right word, but with a potentially neat twist, we now have Wednesday night, Atalanta have a chance to win their first major trophy in 61 years. So I don't know, it feels like a fun week to me. There was stuff happening for clubs that perhaps haven't had that opportunity to have things happen in a while.
Is it a changing of the guard, Mina? The fact that Bologna are qualifying for the Champions League and Atalanta are in a European final for the first time ever and into a third Coppa Italia final under Gasperini?
No.
Oh, okay.
Oh, Mina!
Just pour cold water on that.
Who stole Christmas? Who stole Champions League Christmas for Bologna?
No, I think it's really great for Bologna. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen next season. I do sort of feel like a lot of the time when teams do really well, we sort of say well done to the coach, and which is rightfully so, because Thiago Motta is amazing. But I do think management has a big thing to do with that. And I do think having a great sporting director, having a man who's experienced at director level, who's done amazing things with Atalanta previously, Sartori, who's come in and built this team as well and helped identify the players, having all of that together, as well as sort of making sure that the management's tasks are defined, is one of the reasons behind Bologna's success. And I sort of want to talk about how management is so important, not just who the players are, not just who the coach is, but just in general, the project being identified and people being in the right places at top level, and ownership is important. But changing of the guard, let's be honest, next year, if they lose Calafiori and they lose Xerxes and they lose Thiago Motta, then I'm going to be a little bit annoyed watching them in the Champions League if I think it's going to be like what I saw from Lazio this season, even though Lazio actually made it out of the group stage, you know. I do want our representatives, if we're having 6 places or 5 places, if we're lucky enough to have another one in 6, then I want the representation to be good enough. And that's where I worry.
Can we not just enjoy the here and now and just praise Bologna without looking ahead to next season and say they might lose so-and-so, they might lose so-and-so? I mean,
Patrick,
why are we fixating on Bologna's Champions League campaign and they haven't even approached it when there's still 2 matches left?
Because I'm miserable that Juve is awful. So I hate the end of this season because I'm miserable. I'm miserable, and I'm trying to spread the misery as much as possible. So you guys go and enjoy Bologna. I know that Juve is going to try to wreck it as much as possible by taking their manager. But either way, one of the main reasons why I feel like I'm so done with the end of the season has probably a little bit to do with the fact that I haven't enjoyed watching my team. And I do think that sometimes affects you as a journalist. And I'm trying to move away from being a fan, but it really hurts my soul. So I'm like, yeah, have fun. It won't last.
You will have your moment to talk about Juventus later on, but Juventus
are
an afterthought in this podcast until we get to the preview of the Coppa Italia Final, which is coming up on Wednesday. We're recording this on the eve of the Coppa Italia Final. But I want to talk about Bologna, Nicky. You made a good point there. You said that the Champions League qualification was sealed after Atalanta beat Roma, but the only reason that was even able to come to pass was because Bologna, first and foremost, went to Naples and won, which, okay, we can caveat it by saying Napoli have been terrible this season. They've dropped a lot of points. They've lost to a number of different teams. But still, you're going and winning at the home of the reigning champions when the pressure is on for you to get a result. And I thought they were absolutely superb.
Yeah, I think... Mina
absolutely superb. Come on,
I did. Controlled. They scored twice early, and then they controlled the game.
Yeah, they were very deserving winners. I mean, it's definitely sometimes hard to pick apart. It has been often with Napoli this season. What is other teams being good and what is Napoli just being bad? Because both goals inside the first 12 minutes were point blank headers, and that shouldn't happen. You just shouldn't, as a team that won the league last season, be giving away goals as straightforward as that. To Mina's point about the sort of the bigger picture and ownership, I think that's an interesting one maybe to touch on with Bologna, because of course this was a club that in 2014, I believe Joey Saputo took over when they were still in Serie B and oversaw that last part. It was right at that sort of switch over, them coming up from Serie B. But since then they've established themselves. At first they were just hanging on as bottom half of Serie A. And the last couple of seasons, it's not been a steady sort of constant move upwards, but they had moved up into mid-table. They were 9th last season. Now we don't know yet, but it's going to be top 4 this season. I think that, or at least top 5, sorry. I think there is a genuine sense of momentum to the project that is positive, that is not just about Thiago Motta. Thiago Motta has a huge part of it. He's a brilliant manager, but I think that there is credit to be given in this ascent to people beyond him. And I think the ownership have done a good job with the club and kept it moving in the right direction. In fact, the decision to appoint Motta was a really brave one at the time because it was unpopular with a lot of people because of the situation with Sinisa Mihajlovic, which I think was a very difficult situation just for all involved. I had a lot of empathy at the time, and I continue to have a lot of empathy for everyone involved in the decision to move on from him as a manager while trying to support him as a person. When someone's sick, that's incredibly complicated thing to work out. Support for Serie A Chronicles is brought to you by Manscaped, who are the best in men's below-the-waist grooming. Shaving your jewels doesn't have to be risky business anymore, thanks to the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra.
This trimmer is all about keeping things smooth and safe so you can trim with confidence. Treat your boys down there and join the 10 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped by going to manscaped.com to get 20% off plus free shipping with code Serie A. With Manscaped, it's easy grooming, no surprises. So, I actually gave my shaver to my best friend because, I don't really understand that much about these things. And I sort of was laughing about it because I was like, why do you guys get so excited about shavers? But he was really excited. And I don't know if that's the usual reaction to get something like that. I was like, oh, it's really good, actually. So is that normal or is that just weird?
Yeah, I think it's a great gift idea. It's the sort of thing where I think men, I don't want to come across with a sweeping gender stereotype, but here you go. I think typically men probably wouldn't buy this for themselves, but I think it's an excellent gift idea. It's the sort of thing where if you're given it, and I was very grateful to Manscaped for having given me this wonderful kit, Exhibit A, which has got all sorts of things in it. We've got a crop smoother. We've got a crop preserver and a couple of very handy gadgets with all of the various things that you need, beautifully presented. And I actually gave it a whirl. I'll spare you the details. But it's very good. It's very effective because the thing you're most concerned about is obviously not cutting yourself. It's quite a delicate area. Again, I'll try and spare you any more details than that. But it does allow you to, it's hygienic. It's safe. It was very smooth. I was then able to moisturize. Again, something I wouldn't ordinarily do. But when you're given this lovely presented package with all of these shavers and creams and ointments and so on and so forth, and the various gradings so you can get the length right, it's quite a nice, it's treating yourself. And I don't think men treat ourselves enough. And I think whereas women typically might go and see the beautician and go for a wax or what have you, you don't really, as a man, certainly in my experience, I've never gone and done likewise. So the idea that I could then, in the comfort of my own home, tend to that particular area of my anatomy was nice. So I'd like to thank Manscaped for that. And I was, you're a little bit wary of it initially and you think, I don't need that. But then as and when you use it, I have to say, you are now preaching to the converted. I'm a Manscaped fan.
Same as Mina. I had to find someone else for mine. I gave mine actually to one of my best friend's husbands, which is a conversation to have with your best friend about is this an appropriate gift to give to your husband? But I checked in on him before because I knew we were going to be talking about this. And he seems very, very pleased as well, echoing a lot of what Patrick said. And he said actually the nose and ear trimmer that came in the kit was also really great as well. So definitely some good tools for all sorts of grooming actually from Manscaped. So well worth checking out if any of that sounds like something you might like, or also, as we've all just been saying, for a gift idea as well, maybe.
Yeah.
Also, Patrick, that is actually a really good point because a lot of the times that, I'll, like for my birthday or whatever it is, people will buy me all these kits with like lotions and potions or like gift cards or anything that sort of, beautifies you or use these lotions. And there's really nothing that I feel like I could get for a man on that occasion. So it's really horrible presents a lot of the time. Like, here's a tie or here's a pair of socks.
Yep.
This kind of makes you, it's also the lotions and potions I do think it's a really nice touch when you give that box because it looks very impressive. So I think it's also a really great gift idea.
Absolutely. It's wonderful.
So you can get 20% off and free shipping, just to remind you guys, with the code Serie A at manscaped.com. If you are thinking this sounds like something you want, please do use that code. It helps us out, guys. We'd love you to do that. There's 20% off as an added incentive to do it. Free shipping with that code Serie A at manscaped.com. Show your balls some love and feel free as a dove. There are some really good players there who we don't know how it's going to go. Mina already mentioned Calafiori. We've talked a lot about Xerxes this season. I think that one of the weird breaks of this season is that the really unfortunate injury for Lewis Ferguson right at the end of the season, which is going to cost him the Euros, probably means he stays now in Bologna for another season, which could be good for them in a roundabout way. And then you look at players like Orsolini, who has been brilliant this season. Is that just Thiago Motta magic, or is it actually he's a good player. I don't know. I was thinking back to when we talked about our Italy squad a week or two ago and who we wanted to start. And none of us had Orsolini in our starting 11, which is telling in itself, perhaps. But yes, of course, Motta is the key ingredient. I mean, even Calafiori, you're talking about someone who he moved inside and gave this license to play in a much more adventurous way as a sort of roaming centre-back, which is not. It's becoming more common, I suppose. You look at what Simone Inzaghi's doing at Inter, but it's not something we've seen a lot of before. He's now the team's leading assist provider on 5 assists. He got another one at the weekend. The recipe won't be the same next season. To call that an assist is generous,
I think. It's a flick on from a corner. I think we're calling that an assist.
Listen, if all strikers get to count there, it's scraping off my knee. Why shouldn't all assist providers get to
Patrick.
count?
Fair enough. I actually think John Lucumi is Bologna's best defender. I don't think he gets any praise at all, to be honest. He's excellent at building out from the back. I've done them a lot recently, Bologna, and I think you made a good point about the management as well. It's not just Giovanni Sartori either. It's Claudio Fenucci, who's the CEO, and also Marco Di Vaio, who's basically in the sort of role of, I think he might now be sporting director, because I think technically Sartori is technical director, but I'm not sure I need to look at the actual organisational chart. But it's interesting. I was told by Lorenzo Amoruso, who used to play for Fiorentina, with whom I was commentating on the Napoli-Bologna game the other day, that he was at Fiorentina against Club Brugge, and Marco Di Vaio was there scouting a couple of players from the Belgian side and saying that's what Bologna's success is all about. It's the fact that they're not necessarily looking for established players. They're already planning on who they can recruit in case they were to lose some of those main names that we've mentioned, Zirkzee, Calafiori, Ferguson, et al. So clearly they are very forward-thinking.
Exactly that. It is forward thinking. It's having a plan in place. It's having a project. Like, a lot of the times that we fall into this trap where we just think like teams are great because of, their coach. And that's normal to see, because you've had like teams like Mourinho, where it's been a lot about the coach rather than about what the ownership has done. And, these big figures that have commanded a presence. But then, those don't survive when the coach goes. A lot of these projects sometimes fail once the coach goes. But I think that what you have, for example, like even Real Madrid right now, everyone talks about Ancelotti. And Ancelotti is obviously our favorite coach. I mean, he's brilliant, but it's not just about him. It's also what his son is doing. It's also what the fitness coach is, the best in the world, that NASA's got a contract with, like it's also having Jose Angel Sanchez, with Juventus back then, it wasn't just whoever, Allegri or Conte, it's also having Marotta or at the time Paratici or whatever it is, and I think that Inter, for example, right now have a great management team. They have money problems, but they have a great management, and Bologna has a great management. And I remember at the time when they did, sack Mihajlovic, I was outraged. Also because I thought it was delusion that they thought that they could do something really special more than they were managing under Mihajlovic. I genuinely did. I thought, like, what do these guys think they're capable of? Like, they're not going to be a top 6 team. They aren't. I mean, they qualified for the Champions League, and it seems like they had all of that set in place. So they weren't delusional. They knew what they wanted. They were planning for it, and they took the steps forward. And I feel like, it is a courageous decision to go for Thiago Motta. So well said by Ninki, but it is having a perfect plan in place. It's also making players like Salmakers, who was always seen as a sort of like auxiliary, great, like not a bad option to bring off the bench for Milan, kind of mediocre, but he's also been brilliant for Bologna. I mean, there's just so many of these players that I look at that I would never have in my team, and yet they've had these great season, and so I hope it lasts.
Freuler, I think, is one we did mention as well, like a real, like, low-key, not the star of the show very often, but he had his so-so chapter in England and then comes back to Italy and reminds us that, when he was at Atalanta, he was also a very influential player.
And Sartori is actually now apparently Bologna are linked with Robin Gosens as well, so he's trying to recruit some of his former Atalanta players.
Project,
absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
It's quite interesting. I'm glad you brought up David. It's Davide Ancelotti, isn't it, his son? Because he was absolutely despised in Naples because, things didn't go well. Things didn't go well for Carlo Ancelotti there. There was the mutiny with Alan and Insigne et al. And I think in hindsight, it probably wasn't a great decision. Certainly what wasn't a good decision, and it's a nice sort of contrast, isn't it, between Bologna planning well and then the reference you made there to Real Madrid and their sort of support staff and hierarchy, because Napoli have none of that since the departure of Cristiano Giuntoli. And Aurelio De Laurentiis, in a peak of hubris, that only he is capable of at the end of last season, just basically played down the entire role of both Spalletti and Giuntoli and saying this team coaches itself, it can run itself. And I think the proof is in the pudding, and this Baba is tasting particularly foul.
You know,
I've never been a fan of Baba.
Oh my God, no, you can't say that.
I can say it. I just did.
I just did.
The only thing that could go wrong with Baba is when they over egg the rum. If it's too drenched in rum, I think it can detract a bit. But no, come on, Baba.
I'm not a fan of it either. I'm not a fan. Sorry.
This is not going to end well. I don't think. Oh well. Shall we move on? Let's
Do you know, I take you on that, just to pick up on that very, very quickly, on a slightly sort of light-hearted but nevertheless true point. One of the great things about Bologna going back to the Champions League is it's going to mean some people are going to get some away trips, because there's 8 group stage games as well this season. So at least 4 away trips for other European clubs to go to Bologna. It's a wicked city. It's a really small, very walkable city with some really good food. And I'm excited for anyone. If it's an English club or someone who's listening to this podcast, sports club who gets to play against Bologna next season, get to that game. You'll have a great time. And the Dallara is one of my favourite littler stadiums compared to San Siro or wherever.
Make sure you have the ragu and not the tortellini in brodo.
Patrick, is this a football podcast or a food podcast?
I mean, we can keep it on gastronomy for sure. To be honest, I mean, I think that is one of the main attractions of going to Bologna. Actually, I think that's going to be very exciting. And we're going to have Parma, another gastronomical footballing hotspot, back in Serie A after their promotion as champions, joined by Como. So we're going to have all the la-di-da, hoi polloi. You know, forget the football hipsters. It's going to be the. I was actually looking at the hotel prices in Como on a Friday night, because I was thinking of going to the game.
No, are you mad? It's like £700.
Ludicrous. Oh, it was ludicrous. I mean, even an Airbnb was way out of my price range. I was like, right, okay, so
Clooney's ruined it as well. I mean, it was already expensive, but I used to, like, growing up, I thought we were really rich, and then my dad's like, no, we can't afford Legobo, and I'm like, what do you mean? I thought we're rich, you know? and it is like it is ludicrously expensive, and ever since it's become like this hotspot where everyone goes to, it's become even more. And I'm like, can you imagine just going to a hotel now? You're paying clearly minimum 1,500 now for any like nice hotel. And the cheaper hotels are I mean, honestly, one of those really awful hotels that you just, you know, you would only want to go in if you're just going to do tourist stuff and come back, and you're looking at 500. It's unaffordable. It's unaffordable.
For anyone who hasn't been paying attention, Como are not managed by Cesc Fabregas, part of why it's been a big story, but he's the assistant manager. He was made interim manager. He didn't have his qualifications, so he's now officially the deputy to Ocean Roberts. And those that dynamic will be interesting to see actually what happens over this summer, whether or not he completes those badges and takes on the official manager's role. But Cesc very much has been the front man of that project. And indeed, in that scene I was mentioning where the DAZN journalist gets in the car with Orsolini, they were cutting back to the studio, and they also had Cesc Fabregas in a very natty white suit on the line doing a video call. So it was a very sort of funny image. That's why I enjoyed this weekend. It was one of those, it felt like very chaotic Italian weekends where we're talking about Bologna running around celebrating, and then suddenly there's Cesc Fabregas looking like he stepped off the set of like a very cool 1980s movie or something, and all sorts going on. It was fun. You
know what? It's so funny because it really has been about Fabregas, except for BBC Wales, who just can't stop talking about their coach Orsini. So it's just been non-stop about that. And then, you know, just on the topic of Orsolini, do you guys really rate this guy? Or like, you know, you look at his sort of rushed shot against Napoli, and I can't figure out if I like Orsolini or not. It's almost like, has he never lived up to the potential that we all thought he has? Or I don't know.
I think he averages a goal every 4 or 5 games in Serie A. I always compare him to Chiesa because Chiesa's hyped as world class and they're from the same age group, and I don't think there's a huge difference in output, to be honest. Maybe Chiesa has better potential, but no, I honestly think it's I like Orsolini. I don't think he's necessarily beyond a team like Bologna. I think if I were him, and I'm not obviously, but I would rather play regularly for a team like Bologna. But the irony is he's not even really been playing that much for Bologna. And that's what's so quirky about this whole Thiago Motta thing. It is really the system rather than the personnel, because it's a little bit like Vincenzo Italiano at Fiorentina, where there was a time when you just felt like he was just changing his team for the sake of it, just to sort of keep everyone guessing. But you never really know who's going to play for Bologna. I mean, they had Berkema, who was back from suspension. He hadn't played against Torino, and he's been their main defender, and yet he was left on the bench because he was still a booking away from suspension, and they thought that maybe the Juventus game would be pivotal, and it didn't turn out that way. But Nicky, you mentioned about Orsolini in this car not knowing where he was going. Roma don't know where they're going, do they? It could be Europa League, it could be the Champions League, it could be none of the above, possibly, depending on what. Well, no, I think they'll definitely make the Europa League, won't they? But Lazio are now breathing down their necks, and I think 2-1 is probably the most flattering defeat for Roma this season than any other match I've seen. I thought how Atalanta didn't score double figures is anyone's guess.
I don't know if I would have gone to double figures, but definitely it was a one-sided game right up until the goal. And the goal really came out of nothing. It was a penalty, a well-taken penalty by Pellegrini, but nevertheless a penalty that didn't particularly feel like it fit with the overall flow of the game. And
it wasn't a penalty either.
Did you think so? I was back and forth on it.
I agree. I don't think it was a penalty either.
Okay.
I'm going to post it later on my Twitter, but I've actually found a still of when Abraham misses the shot. There's Lukaku, Bove, and another Roma player who I can't remember, who all have their head in their hands as if to say, what have you missed? None of them are appealing for a penalty. So I think that's quite telling. If you go from the reaction of the team that has supposedly been fouled, then if they're all up in arms and you think, okay, but I don't think the shot was impeded from Martin de Roon lunging it. Head to SerieAChronicles.com/Patreon now and subscribe to the Chronicles Tifosi Patreon membership with a free 7-day trial. Get early access to every full-length episode and voice note before the rest of the world. Plus, all episodes are 100% ad-free. And you get bonus Patreon-only exclusive episodes, video episodes, and behind-the-scenes extras. Also, be sure to join the new chat community in the Patreon app and chat with fellow subscribers.
It's time for today's Lucky Land horoscope with Victoria Cash.
Life's gotten mundane, so shake up the daily routine and be adventurous with a trip to Lucky Land. You know what they say, your chance to win starts with a spin. So go to LuckyLandSlots.com to play over 100 social casino-style games for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. Get lucky today at LuckyLandSlots.com.
Available to players in the U.S., excluding Washington and Michigan. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply.
Step into the world of power, loyalty, and luck.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
With family, cannolis, and spins mean everything.
Now, you wanna get mixed up in the family business.
Introducing The Godfather at ChumbaCasino.com. Test your luck in the shadowy world of The Godfather slot.
Someday, I will call upon you to do a service for me.
Play The Godfather, now at ChumbaCasino.com.
Welcome to the family.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply.
Either way, it did make a slightly nervy finish. Roma never really looked like they were going to score a second goal, but they had the ball a bit more and they sort of moved in the areas of the pitch where you thought something could happen. I thought Atalanta's first half was spellbinding. It was some really, really brilliant football from them. And it is, again, that thing of how do you pick apart what are they doing well and what are Roma doing badly. Roma look like a team who are exhausted, who perhaps are deflated from that Europa League defeat. It was a pretty heartbreaking way for that Europa League defeat to happen, not because they deserved to go through, because I don't think they did over two legs, but they'd got it back, right? They'd gone from being out of the tie altogether with a couple of penalties. They'd found a way back into that tie. And suddenly you started to think, actually, what if they steal this? What if they have that muscle memory of a team that's been to 2 European finals and in 2 years and find a way to win a game that they shouldn't? They looked really flat in the first half here, and Atalanta looked anything but flat. De Ketelaere, I mean, I've said many times how much I enjoy him. When he's like this, he's brilliant. Koopmeiners has hit the woodwork. I think De Ketelaere had another shot pushed onto the woodwork by Svilar. Svilar stopped this from being a massacre. Atalanta's finishing stopped this from being a massacre. But Atalanta were, shockingly, when you think how close they've been in the league all season and they're both in the same European competition semi-final, they were a completely different class to Roma on Sunday night.
It's total football. I mean, Atalanta are just one of those teams that, you know, ferocious, angry, always motivated, always show up. I think that's the most underrated thing about them, is that they're just a team that you never rarely find them on an off day. You're always scared of them, always scared of what they'll do. And you look at their players, and none of them were hugely standout players. And yet, like, you just knew as soon as they were going after Di Cattelare that this is the guy who had like a terrible season at Milan would come and shine. There was no one who was under any illusion that it wouldn't work out for Di Cattelare at Atalanta. And I think that tells you everything that you need to know about Atalanta and how much people trust in their ability to develop players and to create something really special. And Scamacca choosing to go there and finding himself really now in the condition of his life, and as someone said, like doing a favor to Italy as well, because now we have a striker up front that we can rely on. I think that's hugely important. I go back to it in the sense that I am a little bit disappointed this season, mostly from football teams, in the sense that I don't think that any of the forward lines have truly shown themselves to be efficient. Too many chances created for too many teams, very few taken. And I list Inter, I list Milan, especially in the Champions League. I list how many, even Juventus and how woeful they are, missed a ton of chances or hit the woodwork, tons of chances. They're just not enough efficiency. And you watch that and you think they should have been 5 or 6-0 up. But again, I don't know how much to take this into consideration, because Atalanta were beautiful and deserve it. And also at home, they've been phenomenal. 38 points in 17 matches. They have been such a force at home. But with Roma, I do think, I mean, Lukaku's just not the greatest striker in the world. Sorry, I'm going to have to point this out again. Yeah. And Simon is not.
We had that debate a few years ago, and I was sticking up for him in the. I was never saying he was the greatest, but I thought he belonged in the top 5 maybe at the time. And I think
you still think that
time has been kinder to Mina's argument than mine.
Yeah, but also I feel sorry for him in this particular match, because I do think that he needed help against the defense, and Baldanzi was not the guy, right? So as in, you sort of do need a little bit more of Dybala. You do need to. It was a little bit better when Tammy Abraham came, but then then it just started to get a little bit out of hand when it was too many attackers as well. But generally speaking, I think Roma look a bit exhausted. This is why I go back to a great management, is because you do need a great fitness coach, and Atalanta have one. So it is being able to always be strong at the final end of the season, at the business end of the season, when it matters, when you are in for the run up to these big finals. It's brilliant that Atalanta are in such good condition despite so many absences that they've had throughout the season, and now Kolasinac being unavailable as well. But it is about building that. And I'm so interested to know what Roma are going to be like next season, because I think they're going to be phenomenal.
You think Roma are going to be phenomenal next season?
I really do. I don't think I've ever trusted a coach who has only shown me so little, but I've never trusted a coach right now as much as I trust in what De Rossi can build and the intellect that he has shown already at management level. And this coming from somebody who, I'm somebody who thinks the coach matters more than anything else. And management and coach matter to me much more than the players will ever manage. So when people say, it's the players no, it's not the players that got you there. It's your ownership and it's your manager. And I think they're so lucky to have De Rossi. If I could choose, I'd have De Rossi.
Now is your moment then to present the compelling case for De Rossi, because I was literally just about to ask, rather provocatively before you mentioned him, whether Roma are actually better off at the moment under De Rossi than they would have been under Mourinho, because Dybala missed the Leverkusen game through injury. He hobbled off against Juventus through injury. He didn't play against Atalanta because of injury. And it feels to me like Roma without Dybala are limited. And that was the same stick that we were beating Mourinho with. It was like, for all of your experience and your credentials and your 26 trophies throughout your career, shouldn't you be able to come up with something better than Roma without good players can't get results? And yet I thought they were poor in Bergamo, and I think it was quite random that they came out losing 2-1 as opposed to any sort of grand plan from De Rossi. That's my opinion. So I'm curious what it is you see in De Rossi that gives you such hope for next season.
Firstly, I think he needs a better management around him. So I would like to see what he does from a fitness issue. I think a lot of what Roma has been doing recently is down to not really having the fitness levels required. And I think playing every 3 days is just not something that they're capable of doing at this stage of the season, in the same way that Atalanta have shown themselves capable of. I think that's one thing to point out, because I haven't seen the very best of certain players. But I do think the growth in Paredes, I think the huge surge in their psychology. I mean, like you said, they didn't have Dybala, and yet they scored 2 goals in Germany. And I think that even if it is penalties, I totally get that. But firstly, they're one of the only Italian teams right now that are scoring their penalties, which is a lot to say. But I do think there is a genuine fight right now. I think that I go back to the way that they navigated Milan. With El Shaarawy, with switching lanes. He knows how to adjust pretty well, but he does need a fit team. I think that even last week when they were having, when they had an issue with it against Bayer Leverkusen, and they had, I forgot his name, like Frimpong was just going for it, and then they had to take off. I always want to call him Zappacosta. What's his name? The other one. The one who was injured. Spinazzola. I always call him Zappacosta, by the way. I'm having such huge issues between these two, yeah? And then switching lane, and it's just like Celik is not the best, but I'm saying if you just somewhat work on bringing different players to create different to have an alternative set of skills, I think that he adjusts very well to teams. I do think that they came back when he started to bringing in Tammy Abraham, having someone alongside Lukaku to take on the defense, and then Roma started to build back up. I think he made a mistake towards the end because it became too much, and then Atalanta had their strength again. But I do think that he is somebody who watches the game and adjusts brilliantly. And I'm not entirely sure that many coaches are capable of that in the same way as he is. For example, De Zerbi, who everyone thinks is so brilliant, I think is so awful at making adjustments during the game. He watches things and he'll see somebody in suffering and he won't make the right substitutions to change the game. Whereas I do think De Rossi does that. I think that he needs a different level of skills. And I'm not sure that Lukaku is the kind of striker that I think works well. And Dybala is a special talent. You're always going to miss Dybala. You're always going to miss Dybala if he's not present. It's like saying, how do you feel if you don't have Lautaro Martinez? He is the most special player. But I don't think that means that they don't create anything without him. Even if it's just a set piece, or even if it's winning a penalty, or even if it's just trying, I think De Rossi's Roma is somebody that I actually fear. I always feel like they're confident. I'm confident of them getting a goal. I wasn't like that under Mourinho.
I would counter that by saying I feel like he's too much of an idealist and he's not pragmatic enough. And I'd like to see a Mina streak in De Rossi. When he was a player, there was so much bite about him, so much competitive spirit. I think it's admirable the fact he keeps coming out after every game and saying the opposition are brilliant and the opposition coach are brilliant. And I understand it. He's in a difficult situation because he's replaced Mourinho. He's been rejecting comparisons with Mourinho. But, he's talking up what a great job that Pioli did, even though he beat him. Then he's saying that Gasperini is a master and so on and so forth. If I'm a Roma player, I want my coach to be a bit more bullish, to be honest. I don't want him to be constantly waxing lyrical about the opposition. And what I did find a little bit, I think there's a naivety about De Rossi in the way that Mourinho went all in on the Europa League. They lost on penalties, but he at least recognised that they were fatigued. They didn't have the squad to be able to compete on several fronts, playing every 3 days into May. De Rossi has not tried to prioritise either thing because, he's got one foot in either shoe or whatever the bloody idiom is. You know what I mean? He's caught between two stools or whatever it is. So, and I know that Gasperini, who again is pretty good at promoting himself, has been talking up the fact that Atalanta haven't prioritised the competition, that they haven't been, they're competitive in the league and they're competitive in the Coppa Italia Final, they're in the Europa League Final. But I think Roma would have been better served had De Rossi said, this is a bridge too far. And I understand why he did it, because I think if he had sacrificed the Europa League to go all in to try and qualify for the Champions League, then people would have said, what's the point of trying to qualify for the Champions League if you're in Europe as it is and you don't try and win that competition? And equally, because Mourinho had such European pedigree. Nikki, bring us a bit of a sort of counterbalance between these two extremes. I feel like we've got sort of De Rossi lover and De Rossi doubter.
I want to say two things. First of which is when Patrick said De Rossi needs to be a bit meaner, I heard Mina like Mina's name.
Jerry Mina.
So I was thinking he needs to be more like Mina. Mina's got great ideas. So yeah, maybe
I thought you meant just a bit of a bitch.
But actually just on the tiredness thing, I do think it's really interesting because these teams have been playing bonkers schedules, and I clearly Roma played a lot of games. but they haven't had actually what Atalanta have had going to the Coppa Italia final as well. And I just wanted to highlight with Atalanta, if you go back to the 14th of March when they play Sporting, so that's I'm just picked that because it's 2 months. 2 months back from that game to here, they played 14 games in 2 months after a season when they've already been playing 2 weeks most of the time. They've lost 3 games in that time, 2 of which were legs of 2-legged games that they could afford to lose. So they lost against Liverpool, they lost against Fiorentina, they still won the tie both times. They drew 2 more games, again, one of those draws against Marseille, they could afford to draw it because they won at home. So their form has been beyond extraordinary. And to do that with a club that is not on the budget of Inter or Milan or one of these clubs where you're supposed to have a squad like that, is astonishing. And I think we should, while being critical of Roma, make sure we highlight quite how incredible it is what Atalanta are doing. And it's one of the things I wanted to get to with mentioning Bologna as well before. I think one of the things that's really fun for me is that you've got 2, I call them insurgent clubs in my column this week, because they're clubs you don't expect to see in the top of the table, who've they're playing quite different football. Actually, they're not identical. They're not doing the same thing. They've got different things about them that are attractive. And I think with Gasperini, a lot of it is familiar. If you've watched Gasperini for a while, it is trusting players in the one-on-one duels. It is encouraging players to get into those situations where they go up against their opposite number. But he really has got the most out of that squad, and you would have to in that fixture list. But yes, when you look at coming off the bench in this game, Miranchuk, Lookman, Scalvini, you're talking about players who've had a big impact this season, who are able to not start every game. And I think that is the biggest testament to Gasperini, but also, as Mina keeps coming to the club putting together a squad with players that fit what he's trying to do and that he can deploy at different times in different games like that. Roma, for sure, we know are going to have a difficult summer when it comes to exactly what they can afford. If they do miss out on the Champions League, which looks a lot more likely after this result, still definitely not nailed on. We've established that there can be 6 Champions League spots for Italy. We're back in a bit of doubt. We discovered this before the show. We're no longer entirely clear if Italy will get all 6 if Atalanta are in the top 4 and win the Europa League. Certainly if they finish 5th and win the Europa League, there will be 6 Champions League spots. Could make a big difference to what options De Rossi has. I imagine Lukaku will not be there next season, but you will have potentially Tammy Abraham fit again. What other sacrifices have to be made if the team is not in the Champions League? We don't know the answers to that yet, and I think that will determine a lot of De Rossi's opportunities. But if you want the example, as ever, of you don't need to be wealthy to put together a good squad, look at Atalanta.
Look at Atalanta, look at Bologna, look at, we're under the misconception that money makes you brilliant. But I would counter that the best Juventus team was the poorest one in their 9 seasons that they had. It was 2015 running to the Champions League with what everyone was laughing about, what free transfers or cheap transfers. It's into having to lose some of their best players and yet continuously building a team that's so strong. It is having a strong management means that wealth doesn't become the most important thing. And so I don't think that that's necessarily what's going to define Roma. It's actually overspending. And I think there was loads of criticism on the fact that they had like 3rd highest wage bill at the time. And yet were only going all out in the Europa League, playing sort of 3 buses parked against, Bayer Leverkusen, for example, last year, and ending up like nowhere near the Champions League spaces. And I think that if you're spending that much money, you are expecting that. I do actually like the fact that De Rossi has tried in everything. Like, he said, I'm going to try to, I don't know if it's intelligent. And I agree with you, Patrick, about pragmatism. I think that's so important. I'm somebody who hates naive coaches and ones who always want to play attacking football, always want to show their ideal style of play. But I do want to see what he's able to build in a whole season if he starts from scratch, because I think that he's smart enough to figure it out. But and just a different topic. We were talking about Bologna before, and if Thiago Motta goes, did you guys ever think who you'd like as a replacement for him? Because there are so many different coaches now, and everyone wants a coach. But who was your ideal? Like for me, it would be Genoa's Gilardino. I just think he's been phenomenal. and I think that's
pretty good shout, to be honest. Yeah, I don't know whether it's. Yeah, obviously it's an upgrade in terms of them playing Champions League football, and Genoa only just back in Serie A and have stayed up. But he has said that he's staying, though. He's just signed a new contract. So I don't see that happening. But then again, something similar happened with Italiano at Spezia before he moved on to Fiorentina. So it doesn't mean it can't happen.
Italiano feels like the other obvious name. He's someone who's done his bit getting Fiorentina
to go from Florence to Bologna. It's quite a weird move, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it's still Champions League, but
it's still going to the Champions League. Yeah.
True.
How do you guys feel about Italiano? Do you feel like he's improving, or do you still rate him as well as you rated him before?
I'm a big fan. I think if you look at where Fiorentina were when he took over and where they are now, they consistently, you could argue they need to be more consistent in the league. But I think you're never going to be that consistent in the league when you're playing so many matches. I think they played 58 last season. They're playing a similar amount this time around as well, because the Conference League involves pre-qualification to begin with, and we've already seen that with them this season. So I think as long as you're leading teams to finals, and he's got 3 finals in 3 seasons, then he ideally needs to win one. You can make a case they were underdogs against Inter, they were underdogs against West Ham. The problem is, even if they were favourites, they're playing in Greece against Olympiacos. I mean, how's your luck? So I do worry for them a little bit there.
I think I've come back around on Italiano. I think there was a point this season where I was starting to doubt, but I agree actually about the number of fixtures that the Europa Conference League has given the team. We just talked about it with Atalanta, how many games they've played. Well, Fiorentina were in a Coppa Italia semi-final as well as going to the final of the Europa Conference League. They played a lot of games. Is it his fault that this team still hasn't managed to find a prolific striker? I don't think you completely absolve him of it. He's not the one doing the recruitment, but it's still a coaching issue as well. It's still partly your responsibility as a coach to get something out of your strikers and to put them in position to be more effective. But I think overall, I'm still on the side of, I think he deserves a bigger opportunity now.
And we have the Coppa Italia final coming up now. It's not Fiorentina in it. It's Atalanta, because they beat Fiorentina on one side of the draw. Juventus got the better of Lazio on the other side of the draw. This is a final we've seen before, 2021 in Reggio Emilia. Atalanta's third final under Gasperini. They lost to Lazio in 2019. They lost to Juventus 2 years later. 3 years on from that, Mina, why should we believe that Atalanta can finally win a trophy and they're not just going to freeze on their big night tomorrow?
Because Juve are pants.
Juve have won the Coppa Italia 14 times, and Allegri's reached the final, I think, in every year bar one, hasn't he? Bar 1 or 2, I think, in his time in charge. So.
Well, the team nearly lost to a team already relegated, with the second worst away record, because Frosinone continues to shock from away from home. But it is a hideous team. And yet they were the ones that showed the better organization, the better game plan, the more desire, the more motivation.
This is Salernitana.
Yes, this is Salernitana. Against Juventus, at home, with players like Vlahovic and McKennie, who was supposed to have this whole new season where he's been playing better. He was probably the worst player on the pitch, Overpaid players, they're just awful right now. They are genuinely awful. 15 points in their last 15 games. And that's largely, the reason why they're even there is because they managed to win against Frosinone. But it's just been so pants to watch. Like when we were watching in the Coppa Italia and at home, they got that 2-0 victory over Lazio. They go away to Stadio Olimpico and they just collapse. And the thing is that there wasn't even anything about it that shocks you there. They always manage to throw on and start to really show something towards the end when they're desperate to get something, which is why Rabiot managed it against Salernitana. But it's not because of anything other than just forcing it and trying as hard as possible to get something. I look at this and I think Atalanta, and the form that they're in and the confidence that they're showing against a team that is so psychologically broken, where nobody knows what the future looks like because the management is not complete. We just talk about Giuntoli, but because there's nothing else. What's the rest of the team, owner or management team look like with a coach that we don't know is going to stay? Because in every press conference, we have to ask if he's staying or not. It's been such a topic of conversation. Fans are divided. Everyone's divided. Management's divided over to keep him or not. Because Elkan still loves the guy. Elkan still feels that, I think he was there for me last season when it was all going crazy and, Agnelli and all the board walked out. I could rely on him so that he has this weird connection to him. I don't think anyone else likes Allegri. It's a team that's in disarray that started the season so well, that had really high hopes of building something special. And the way to collapse like that it's just awful. I cannot imagine that in this match of all matches, when they've been going at 5 miles an hour, that they're all of a sudden going to show themselves up against Atalanta, who's desperate to win a trophy. Atalanta, who's got Scamacca is actually not available for this match, but Lookman, that's in brilliant. I mean, Ruggeri, who can score goals like he can. I look at this and I think it's fairly impossible. Right now, I would give them a 5% chance of winning over Atalanta.
Almost
wouldn't
inconceivable.
It just be the Juventus thing to do? Wouldn't it just be the Juventus thing to do? Just to show up, be like, yeah, we'll win that now. We've been rubbish. It doesn't matter. We'll win this trophy and go back to being rubbish next week in the league.
If it is, it might stop me trying to kill myself. Yeah.
Is there not a case to say that now they've qualified for the Champions League, which was always their stated goal, and Allegri was saying that even when they were 2 points behind Inter, as they were for the first half of the season. Now that they've qualified for the Champions League, so they don't have to worry, they could even lose their last 2 matches of the season. Is there not an argument to say they'll be liberated and they'll just go there and it's a one-off game and they'll know that they've been there and done it before and Atalanta haven't? I don't think it's as open as shut as it might first appear. I completely take your point and I completely agree that if you look at the form guide, then Atalanta are just streets ahead. But I feel like there's something about the Coppa Italia that always sees Federico Chiesa step up. I remember even when Juventus lost the Coppa Italia final 2 years ago to Inter 4-2 after extra time, Vlahovic scored in that final. I've just got a feeling that Juventus have the star quality that Atalanta don't possess, particularly with Scamacca suspended. And I see it more likely that Juventus win the Coppa Italia than and win it for the 15th time than Atalanta winning it for the second time.
When did Atalanta last beat Juventus? They've drawn both games this season. I can't think of a recent win they've had over them. It's not a tie which they have a history of getting the better of Juve. And of course, history is what it is, right? You've got different teams on the pitch today, but I think that Atalanta are the better team, but perhaps it really is just my mind playing tricks because of years of expectation. But I wasn't being flippant before. I do sort of just expect Juventus to show up, turn it on for a game, win it, and then go back to being rubbish for the remaining games the league season.
$50. Put your money where your mouth is. Come on, guys. Let's do a bet because here's the thing, right? You look at certain players like, we don't know if Rabiot is going to stay. We don't know if Chiesa is going to stay. We don't know if McKennie is going to stay. Alexandro is quite possibly one of the worst players right now on the pitch. We don't know if Bremer is going to be bought over by Manchester United. A lot of these players have just given up because they've got nothing to prove. They don't know if they're there for the next season. Allegri just seems so angry because he can. Before, when he used to scream, it was funny and everyone would be like trying to listen to it and trying to like please him. But now he just screams and nobody really cares. No one listens. If anything, it just irritates them that he's constantly screaming on the sidelines. It doesn't have the desired effect that he thinks it has or that it used to have. We're talking about players who show a lot of potential, but I thought they were overachieving the first half of the season. And so now I'm just like, well, it's returning to the mean, right? They're just not such great players. It's a terrible midfield. And with the pressure thing, I get it because Salernitana, weirdly, ever since they got relegated, they score a goal, against Atalanta. And I'm thinking, whoa, where did that come from? And then they produce this performance against Juventus. And sometimes, feeling liberated allows you to just indulge in playing the game of football that you enjoy. But this game in particular does come with pressure because everyone's talking about this potential trophy that they could win to make sure that this season isn't the worst season of their lifetime. But the problem is that it's not just a Serie A game where they can afford to lose it. It's a game they have to win. And I wonder whether they're still going to have that.
They don't have to win, do they? Because they could win on penalties. So they don't even necessarily need to win. I was just
so you think that's what they're going to go for?
No, I think they could. The final they lost to Inter, that went to extra time. The final they lost to Napoli, they lost on penalties in the lockdown season. That game went straight to penalties. It was level after 90 minutes. The one they won against Atalanta, that was played in Reggio Emilia. Chiesa and Kulusevski scored. I've just got a feeling that Juventus will be very hard to beat. And I think Juventus, if there's one thing they know how to do, it's defend. And actually, I was talking to a colleague yesterday who works for Abu Dhabi TV, and he said to me he can see one of two scenarios. Either Juventus win 1-0 or Atalanta win 5-0. Which I don't think it's as black and white as that, if you'll excuse the pun. But I can see that if Atalanta were to score early, then they might be able to do what they probably should have done to Roma on Sunday. You know, they scored 2 in 3 minutes. They were 2-0 up by 20 minutes. I think... I don't necessarily want to say this on record, but I'm about to say it anyway. I think deep down there's quite a large portion of Italian football followers who would quite like to see Juventus humiliated in a final. Is that me being unfair? Sorry, Mina.
No, I think you're right. Yeah, that's definitely true.
Yeah,
I used to enjoy that. Like, that was the best part about being a Juventus fan, is how much people hate you. It's funny, you know. So I totally agree with that. I think most people would love to see Juventus like really hit hard. It's been like a source of entertainment.
I just think that as a journalist who's got to write something on this game and then also has an early morning train journey the next day, I'll be shocked if it doesn't go to extra time, because that's just what happens when you've got no sleep planned.
I think Scamacca's absence is a huge absence. Like, it is.
It's a big difference.
And I do think Juventus could take care of somebody like Di Cattelare, you know. So it's about trying to push through and really just continue to overwhelm. And you know, Gatti's always got a mistake in him.
He's got a goal in him as well, though.
He's got a goal in him too. You wonder what Vlahovic you're going to get, you know, whether Chiesa's... I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. But all I can tell you is that they're the reason why I hate football in general at the moment.
We don't know which way the Coppa Italia final is going to go. We don't know who's going to get relegated either, short of Salernitana, who are already down. Sassuolo look like they're really struggling now, having led at Genoa. They ended up losing by 2-1. But Udinese's win last night means they're now clear of the relegation zone. So I'm looking at the table here. Sassuolo, 29 points in 19th position. They are 3 points behind Frosinone with 2 matches remaining. Frosinone are 17th with 32 points. Empoli have 32 points. Cagliari have 33, the same total as Udinese. And Verona aren't safe either, despite leading against Torino. Had they won that game, they would have been clear. Lecce were already confirmed as being safe when Cagliari lost 5-1 at Milan on Saturday night. So the curious thing is we've still got plenty of 6-pointers coming up. There's still a game between Cagliari and Sassuolo. And interestingly, Udinese's last 2 matches are against both Frosinone and Empoli, who are the 2 teams either side of the relegation zone. I've felt for the last 2 weeks that we're going to have a situation like we did last season, where 2 teams finish level on points in 17th and 18th. And we have a play-out, so a one-legged relegation playoff in a neutral venue. And last season it was Spezia and Verona. It's the latter who won. How does this play out? Are Sassuolo down, first of all, Mina?
It's so weird that Inter have only ever lost to a team that's going to be relegated. It's just, I find it so bizarre, right? And Sassuolo also got that win against Juventus. You know, again, this was a team that was very well run, that always picked their coach as well. I feel bad, honestly. And I do think the absence of Berardi has had such a huge effect on them in general. But yes, I don't see them coming back from this. They look so deflated and psychologically done. So I do think they're going down, unfortunately.
So Sassuolo's next game is against Cagliari. So you feel that is must win. In fact, there's a couple of very interesting games coming up in the penultimate round. Udinese Empoli is another one. And Salernitana host Verona. So you get the sense that Verona should be safe come the final weekend of the season. Udinese know if they beat Empoli, they are safe. But it seems like we get this situation every time, doesn't it? Because one team dominates, like Napoli last season into this time around. So as a result, the 40-point mark gets chipped away to sort of mid-30s.
I thought this was actually quite an interesting weekend for some of those teams, because we were talking after the Inter Sassuolo game about motivations and teams not always applying their best at the end of the season. Well, Genoa, who haven't got obvious things to play for, beat Sassuolo very deservedly. Torino, who don't have obvious motivations, beat Verona. So you did have these mid-table teams that are often criticised and accused of not putting enough effort in getting those results. I think in Sassuolo's case, look, the Inter game was a dreadful game of football, and they managed to score goals in it, but they didn't really present a compelling case of a team moving in the right direction. Having watched them against Having watched them against Genoa this weekend, I'd be very surprised if they get out, especially given that they are 3 points away right now from those teams above them. So I think Sassuolo are going down at this point in my book, which only leaves one spot for the other teams. Empoli, I thought, actually played really well against Lazio. They were the better team through most of the first half and then conceded right before half time from a set piece, I think, and ended up losing 2-0. But given Lazio have been playing very well, that was always going to be a tough one. I think they showed signs of life.
Actually, Empoli have been one of the best. Like, I would feel
but they don't
bad
score.
They don't score.
That's the problem.
They defend really well, but they don't score. So,
and I think they still need a win.
They're quite organised. I always feel sorry for them when they concede because you just think that they're going to just keep trying holding. Yeah, you're right. I don't know, but I wouldn't. If I could choose, yeah, I actually don't know who I would choose, to be honest with you.
I think Frosinone are going down.
Do you think so?
Yes.
Because Udinese also 2 draws and a win now under Cannavaro. Signs of good
and even
good
the
change,
game they lost wasn't really fair, was it? 20 minutes and there was a 94th minute winner, that crazy game against Roma. So, yeah. And they've drawn against Bologna and Napoli. So they're doing very well.
But Frosinone's defence almost seems like they should be condemned, like...
Frosinone stitched me right up. I thought Inter were going to have another game like they did against Sassuolo, and then they went and won 5-0 and got absolutely savaged because I naively tweeted it. More for me, yeah, I can just see Frosinone because I think they've barely won a game in 2024 apart from when they beat Salernitana, which is not really relevant. And it's just sort of peak Di Francesco, isn't it? It's just gung-ho. I'm not going to adapt.
So naive. That's naive. I mean, Di Francesco is so naive. And Calzona, by the way, always throws to him as one of the best coaches. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, all right then,
Yeah, unless Slovakia have a very long run in Euro 2024, I don't think we'll be hearing much from Ciccio Calzona for a while now.
Oh no, I feel bad. Yeah,
but there we have it. So it's still very much to play for. I feel like this time next week we'll have a much clearer idea of who will be going up or who will be staying up and who will be going down. We mentioned that Parma and Como are already on their way to Serie A. We'll have the Serie B playoffs to come. And I know Mina wanted to touch upon the third tier playoffs, didn't you, Mina?
Oh, yeah, I wanted to... It's just something that I don't know. I don't
have no idea why this is funny right now.
It's because that I've just reached the level where I just feel like I want to top myself at this point of the season. But basically, we know that there's a next gen, and Juventus are in the playoffs. They'll play Casertana, who is actually in the form of their life, to try to go up to Serie B. And there was this whole conversation about whether or not they can go to Serie B, which is fine because it's still not in the same league as Juventus A team. Next gen, under 23, and their striker is 34 years old, Simone Guerra. I mean, I just feel like it's so on brand that their youth team or whatever, their young team has a pensioner up front. Like, I just think it's so on brand that, like, this is the team that's supposed to be nurturing youth so that we can integrate them into the first team, has the oldest player in the Juventus squad. I just think it's so on brand for Juventus to have a striker in the under 23 team being that old. Maybe if he played for Juventus alongside Vlahovic, he'd actually score goals. I don't know.
We have got some shout-outs this week. We've got Otto Sevaldsson Lillebø, Nick Rigg and Aga Rees. I apologise for any, if not all of those names that I've butchered, but thank you very much for the support. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you everyone for supporting us. Just a reminder, as Patrick said at the top of the show, if you would like to give our Patreon Tifosi membership a spin, we do have free trials available right now on the website, SerieAchronicles.com. But you can find us on all the usual socials, Patrick Kendrick, Mina Rizuki and Nikki Bandini, as well as the Serie A Chronicles official account. We will be back with some sort of update midweek after the Coppa Italia Final for certain. But until then, enjoy your weeks, everybody, and we'll speak to you soon.
Serie A Chronicles is a Chronicles production.
Sports Social Podcast Network.